The text message was simple. Come over. I have something to show you. But when Sarah opened her apartment door that night, her smile held secrets I couldn't decode. The familiar scent of vanilla candles mixed with something else, nervous energy, anticipation, maybe even mischief. As we climbed the stairs to her bedroom, each step felt heavier than the last. My heart hammered against my ribs, drowning out the soft jazz playing from her speakers. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what waited. Behind that bedroom door, sometimes the most unexpected moments reshape everything you thought you knew about friendship, trust, and the delicate boundaries that define our relationships. The notification pinged on my phone at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, hardly the time for casual social calls. Sarah and I had known each other for 3 years, ever since we'd been paired for a marketing project at the consulting firm where we both worked. Our friendship had always been comfortable, predictable even. We grabbed lunch together, complained about difficult clients over coffee, and occasionally caught weekend movies. Nothing more, nothing less, but this text felt different. Come over. I have something to show you, followed by her address and a winking emoji. The emoji threw me off. Sarah wasn't typically one for playful digital expressions. She was methodical, professional, the type who color-coded her calendar and never forgot a deadline. I stared at my phone for a full 5 minutes, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Was this some kind of work emergency? Had she discovered something about the Peterson account we'd been struggling with? Or maybe she'd finally decided to redecorate her apartment and wanted a second opinion. That seemed more like her practical, straightforward. The drive to her place took 20 minutes through the quiet suburban streets. Her apartment complex was one of those modern developments with manufactured charm brick facades, decorative shutters, and perfectly manicured landscaping that looked identical in daylight, but somehow mysterious under the amber glow of street. Sarah answered the door before I could knock, as if she'd been watching from the window. She wore a flowing black dress I'd never seen before, something that seemed more suited for a dinner date than a casual Tuesday evening. Her usually straight hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and there was something different about her makeup, more dramatic, more intentional. You came, she said, and I caught a hint of surprise in her voice, as if she hadn't been entirely sure I would. You said you had something to show me. I was curious. I stepped into her foyer, noting the dim lighting and the jazz music playing softly from hidden speakers. Is everything okay? She closed the door behind me with deliberate slowness, turning the deadbolt with an audible click. Everything's perfect, she replied, but her smile carried an edge I couldn't quite interpret. Would you like some wine? I opened a bottle of that Pinot Noir you mentioned liking. The fact that she remembered my wine preference from a casual comment months ago struck me as both thoughtful and oddly significant. I accepted the glass she offered, noting how her fingers brushed against mine during the exchange, a touch that lingered just a moment too long. So, I said, taking a sip of wine that was indeed excellent, what did you want to show me? Sarah's smile widened, revealing perfect white teeth. It's upstairs. In my bedroom. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. My rational mind scrambled for innocent explanations, new artwork, a furniture rearrangement, perhaps some kind of work presentation she'd set up. But something in her tone, and the way she held my gaze without blinking, suggested this evening would venture far beyond the boundaries of our usual friendship. Lead the way, I heard myself say, though my voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Following Sarah up the carpeted staircase felt like crossing an invisible threshold. Each step seemed to echo louder than it should, despite the soft jazz music continuing to drift from the living room speakers below. The hallway walls were lined with framed photographs, mostly landscapes and abstract art pieces that I'd never really noticed during my few previous visits to her apartment. "I've been thinking about our conversation last week," Sarah said over her shoulder as we reached the landing. "About relationships, about taking risks." I struggled to recall the specific conversation she referenced. We'd had lunch at that little bistro downtown, and she'd mentioned feeling stuck in patterns, always playing things safe. I'd agreed, admitting that my own dating life had become predictably routine. But I hadn't realized she'd been paying such close attention to my responses. "You said something that stuck with me," she continued, pausing outside her bedroom door. Her hand rested on the brushed silver handle, but she didn't turn it yet. "About how the most meaningful experiences often come from unexpected situations." Had I said that? It sounded like something I might have said, probably while trying to sound more philosophical than I actually felt. But now, standing in her dimly lit hallway, those words seemed to carry weight I hadn't intended. "Sarah," I began, but she held up a finger to silence me. "Before we go in, I need you to promise me something," she said, turning to face me fully. In the soft hallway lighting, her eyes seemed darker than usual, more intense. "Promise me you'll keep an open mind about what you're about to see." The wine had begun to work its way through my system, creating a pleasant warmth that made everything feel slightly surreal. "What exactly am I about to see?" "Just promise me," she insisted, stepping closer until I could smell her perfume, something floral, with undertones of sandalwood that was definitely new. "Promise me you won't judge, and you won't panic." The word panic sent a small chill down my spine. What could possibly be behind that door that would make me panic? My imagination began racing through possibilities, most of them involving some kind of emergency or crisis that required my immediate attention. "I promise," I said finally, though I wasn't entirely sure what I was agreeing to. Sarah's smile returned, brighter now and tinged with what looked like relief. "Good, because what's behind this door might change everything between us." She turned the handle slowly, almost ceremoniously. The bedroom beyond was darker than the hallway, lit only by several candles scattered around the room. The familiar scent of vanilla was stronger here, mixed with something else, another perfume. Different from Sarah's dot. As my eyes adjusted to the candlelight, I began to make out the details of the room. The bed had been made with crisp white sheets and seemed to glow in the flickering light. But it was the figure sitting in the armchair beside the window that made my breath catch in my throat. "Hello, Marcus," came a familiar voice from the shadows. "Sarah's told me so much about you." Emily Chun stood up from the armchair with fluid grace, her silhouette unmistakable even in the dim candlelight. Sarah's best friend since college. Emily had always been a peripheral figure in my interactions with Sarah present at group gatherings. Mentioned in passing conversation, but never someone I'd spent significant time with one-on-one. "Emily," I managed, my voice sounding strangled. "I didn't expect, Sarah didn't mention ... "That's because we wanted to surprise you," Sarah said, moving to stand beside her friend. In the candlelight, the two women looked like they'd stepped out of some Renaissance painting, all flowing hair and mysterious smiles. Emily wore a deep burgundy dress that complemented her olive skin tone perfectly. Her long black hair was pulled to one side, revealing elegant silver earrings that caught the flickering light. She'd always been beautiful, but tonight there was an intentionality to her appearance that made my pulse quicken. "We've been talking," Emily said, her voice carrying that slight accent that hinted at her family's Korean heritage. "About you, actually." The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. I found myself acutely aware of every sound, the soft jazz still playing from downstairs, the gentle hiss of candle wicks burning, my own increasingly rapid breathing. "About me?" I repeated, looking between the two women who stood facing me. Like they'd rehearsed this moment, Sarah moved closer, her wine glass still in hand. Do you remember what you said about meaningful experiences coming from unexpected situations? You keep mentioning that, I said, trying to inject some lightness into my voice. But I'm starting to think you two have something very specific in mind. Emily laughed softly, a sound like wind chimes. Sarah thought you might be interested in exploring something different, something that goes beyond the usual. Boundaries of friendship. The implication hung in the air like incense smoke. My rational mind scrambled to process what was being suggested, while another part of me, a part one rarely acknowledged, responded with a surge of excitement that I couldn't entirely suppress. I don't understand, I said, though increasingly I thought I did. We want to share an experience with you, Sarah said simply, all three of us, together. The directness of her statement was both shocking and somehow liberating. No more dancing around implications or reading between lines. The offer was clear, unmistakable, and completely unexpected. This isn't something I began, then stopped. What was I trying to say? That I'd never been in this situation before? That seemed obvious, but I wasn't interested. That would have been a lie. Emily stepped forward, closing the distance between us until I could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. None of us have, she said softly. That's what makes it exciting. Sarah joined her so that I was standing. Between them both, we're not asking for anything you're not comfortable with, she said, but we thought, maybe you'd like to explore this with us. The candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the suburban night continued. Its quiet routine, while inside this bedroom, three friends stood on the precipice of something entirely new. Time seemed suspended in that candlelit bedroom, as if the normal rules of cause and effect had been temporarily lifted. I stood between Sarah and Emily, acutely aware of their proximity, the warmth radiating from their bodies, the way the flickering light played across their faces. I need a moment to think, I said finally, surprised by how steady my voice sounded despite the chaos in my head. Of course, Sarah said immediately, stepping back to give me space. This is a lot to process, Emily nodded in agreement. We don't want you to feel pressured. If you're not comfortable with this, we completely understand. Their consideration somehow made the situation feel more surreal rather than less. This wasn't some impulsive moment of passion or alcohol-fueled pour. Judgment. They had clearly thought this through, discussed it between themselves, planned this evening with careful attention to my comfort level. I walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. A few windows glowed in the apartment complex. Across the way, each one representing someone else's Tuesday evening, probably spent watching television, reading books, or scrolling through social media. Normal, predictable activities that suddenly seemed to belong to a different world entirely. How long have you two been planning this? I asked, still facing the window. A few weeks, Sarah admitted. Ever since that conversation we had about taking risks. It got Emily and me talking about our own comfort zones, about experiences we'd always wondered about but never had the courage to pursue. I turned back to face them, and you both agreed that I was the person you wanted to explore this with. Emily smiled, and for the first time that evening, it seemed completely natural and unguarded. Sarah's told me so much about you over the years. Your kindness, your sense of humor, the way you make her laugh. And the few times we've all been together at parties or group events, I've always felt comfortable around you. Plus, Sarah added, with a hint of her usual playfulness, you're probably the only person we know who wouldn't make this weird afterward. That comment made me laugh, breaking some of the tension that had been building in my chest. You're assuming I'm going to say yes, are you? Emily asked, her directness both challenging and appealing. I looked at both of them, really looked at them. Sarah, who I'd known for 3 years as a colleague and friend, reliable and thoughtful and occasionally surprising. Emily, who I'd always found attractive but had never allowed myself to consider as anything more than Sarah's friend. Now they stood before me offering something unprecedented, something that could either deepen our friendships or complicate them beyond repair. If we do this, I said slowly, what happens tomorrow? What happens next week when we're all back at work or at the next group event? We figure it out as we go, Sarah said. Just like we figure out everything else in life. Emily stepped closer. Again, the only way to know what happens next is to decide what happens now. The candles continued their quiet dance, and somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed 11 times. What happened next changed everything and nothing in ways I never could have anticipated. Some boundaries, once crossed, reveal new landscapes of possibility. Others simply dissolve, leaving behind something more honest, more real, more connected than what came before. The most unexpected moments don't always happen the way we imagine they will. Sometimes they happen exactly as they should. Want to discover what choice Marcus made and how it transformed all 3 relationships? The complete story awaits, including the intimate details, emotional revelations, and surprising aftermath that followed this unforgettable night. Click below to read the full uncensored version and find out how one evening redefined the meaning of friendship, trust, and desire,